I want to bring in former Republican presidential candidate and former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. Governor Huckabee, good to see you.
Good morning, Maria. Great to be with you.
So here we are after another Super Tuesday. Can Trump be presidential and unify the Republican Party? We're still asking the question.
Oh, I think absolutely he can. He showed a terrific side of that last night. I thought his speech was spot on. He focused on Hillary, focused on the issues that made him the nominee. When he talked about unfair trade deals, the loss of jobs, America's loss of respect in the world, our lack of national security, these are the reasons that Donald Trump is the Republican nominee. And he got back to that script last night, and I thought did very well.
Not to mention, Bob Nardelli, an economy that is sort of stuck in neutral. We know that from the jobs numbers that were just released.
Yeah, it's amazing, Maria. Governor, what advice, you're providing input, I'm sure, to Donald. What advice are you giving him about getting this low and slow economy? Every year we see this aspirational number, GDP, come out, and then they walk us down quarter after quarter.
I think the most important thing he needs to do is to give some level of predictability to the business community and tell them tax rates are not going to go up. Give them some indication they're going to go down. Make it clear you're not going to overregulate businesses so that they're constantly having to add cost to the bottom line of doing business. It's killing the ability of U.S. makers, manufacturers, and employers to go forward when every time they turn around, the government or somebody wants to hit them with a brand new cost that either they have to eat or pass on to the consumers. There's got to be some level of relief for that, or we're not going to see economic numbers improve, and the job numbers aren't going to get better.
Which is why regulation and rolling back regulation, Lisa Booth, has been one of the tenets of the Republican Party.
Well, and it is so important. I mean, look, for the first time in our nation's history, we're seeing more small businesses go under than being created.
That's right.
That is so scary. I mean, that is the bulk of where our nation's jobs come from, and it's so important to make sure we have a healthy private sector. And that's the direct contrast that Donald Trump needs to paint with Hillary Clinton, because she is an extension of the failed economic policies we've seen under President Obama, the same regulatory agenda that is strangling businesses across the country. And so it is so important for him to draw that contrast.
And Bernie Sanders has pulled her even further left, which I know Governor Huckabee can speak to. The Wall Street Journal today, Governor, highlights what Hillary Clinton said when she launched her campaign for Senate about 16 years ago. I don't believe government is the source of all of our problems or the solution to them. Well, that's very different than what you hear from her today.
Well, if Bernie Sanders is her life jacket to help her float, that life jacket's made out of pure lead. It's going to be a real drag on her as she tries to go out there and convince the Bernie Sanders supporters that she's with them. And when she does that, she's basically saying to the business community, you're screwed. One of the ways that I think Donald Trump can make a big inroad is to tell people, look, we're going to roll back some of the specific mandates of the Obama administration. We're going to certainly go after Dodd-Frank because it didn't take on the big banks. It took on community banks. And you mentioned small business a moment ago. One of the reasons small businesses are hurting, they can't get capital. And the reason, a $25,000, a $35,000 loan, they can't get it because the banks won't give it. It costs more money to process it under Dodd-Frank than they can ever get back in the cost of doing business.
And yesterday we saw the GOP, the House, come out with an alternative to Dodd-Frank. They're coming out with real specifics in terms of rolling back these regulatory burdens.
Yeah, Governor, I think, as we said, one of the most important things for Donald would be to start to roll some of these things back. We've seen this administration stymie $400 billion of potential mergers and acquisitions to drive productivity, to get more globality into our U.S. companies. Well, your thoughts about the administration and what you would advise Donald to do going forward relative to capitalization and what's going on out there today?
Well, again, I think capitalization is going to have a lot to do with making sure that the lenders can afford to lend, that they're going to get a reasonable return on their money, and they're not going to be regulated to death and spend all the money that they make on lawyers and accountants. And then there needs to be some sense that if you're going to borrow the money, you can get it back in business. But if you're stuck with the cost of Obamacare, stuck with the cost of Dodd-Frank regulations, and then the unknown regulations that the bureaucrats put on, one of the single most important things Donald Trump can do is to say he will not allow any legislation to go through that does not have the authority of regulation left with Congress, not with bureaucracies. Read the language of most legislation, and here's what it does. It gives a broad stroke of power to a regulatory body, and it says the agency shall, and anytime you see those words, the agency shall, that bill ought to be vetoed, sent back to Congress and said, if you want to regulate something, you as the people's representatives step up and do it. Don't pass this off to some bureaucrat who has no skin in the game.
Yeah, really great analysis, Governor, as always. Good to see you, sir. Thanks so much.
You bet.
Governor
Thanks.
Mike Huckabee joining me there.